The moment Ethan Cole discovered his son's nanny had hacked into his private computer, he was ready to destroy her life. Standing in his penthouse office at midnight, watching security footage of this poor woman touching his billion-dollar secrets, rage consumed him. He'd trusted her with his child, and she'd betrayed that trust by breaking into the one place he'd forbidden everyone to enter. But then he saw what she'd actually done to his computer, and everything he thought he knew about power, intelligence, and worth shattered in an instant. If you want to see how a single mistake changed 2 lives forever, stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this hooks you, hit that like button. The glass walls of Ethan Cole's corner office reflected the Seattle skyline like a mirror of his own isolation. 32 years old, worth $3 billion, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed. Not really laughed. The kind that came from your gut and made you forget, just for a second, that everything in your life was measured, controlled, and ultimately empty. Mr. Cole, the quarterly projections are ready for your review. Ethan didn't look up from his laptop. His assistant's voice was the same as always, efficient, professional, forgettable. He'd had 7 assistants in the past 2 years. Or was it 8? He couldn't remember their names anymore. They all blurred together into one continuous stream of competence and inevitable resignation. Leave them on my desk. Yes, sir. The door closed with a soft click. Ethan continued typing, his fingers moving across the keyboard with mechanical precision. The code on his screen was elegant, beautiful even, but it was also broken. Somewhere in these thousands of lines was a flaw that had his entire engineering team stumped for 3 weeks. A flaw that was currently threatening a $300 million acquisition deal that would close or collapse in 72 hours. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. What? He snapped, answering without checking the caller ID. Daddy? Ethan's entire body went rigid. That small voice cut through his frustration like a knife through paper. Liam. He forced his tone to soften. What's wrong, buddy? When are you coming home? Ava made cookies and she said we have to wait for you, but they smell really good and I don't know if I can wait much longer. Ethan glanced at the corner of his screen. 9:47 p.m. He'd promised to be home by 7. Again. I'll be there soon, okay? Don't wait for me. You can have the cookies. But Ava said, tell Ava I said it's fine. Ethan heard the sharpness creep back into his voice and hated himself for it. I'll be home in an hour. You said that last time, and you didn't come home until I was sleeping. The accusation in his 6-year-old son's voice was worse than any business competitor's attack. Because it was true. All of it. Tonight will be different. That's what you always say. The line went dead. Liam had hung up on him. His 6-year-old son had hung up on him, and Ethan couldn't even blame him for it. He stared at his phone, then at the broken code on his screen, then at the stack of contracts waiting for his signature. The empire he'd built after his divorce was supposed to prove something. To his ex-wife, to his father, to everyone who'd ever doubted him. But sitting here alone in his glass tower, he couldn't remember what he'd been trying to prove anymore. The penthouse was dark when Ethan finally walked through the door at 11:23 p.m. He'd broken his promise again. The cookies Liam mentioned were arranged on a plate on the kitchen counter, covered with plastic wrap. A small note was taped to the wrap in Ava's neat handwriting. Liam waited until 10. He tried really hard. Ethan picked up the note, crumpled it, then smoothed it back out and set it on the counter. The guilt was familiar now, almost comfortable in its constancy. He headed toward Liam's room, walking quietly through the sprawling penthouse that had cost him $14 million and felt worth about 14 cents. His son's door was cracked open, a nightlight casting a soft glow across the race car bed that Liam had begged for last Christmas. Liam was asleep, his small chest rising and falling peacefully. His favorite stuffed elephant was clutched in one arm. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching the only person in the world he'd ever loved unconditionally, and felt the familiar ache of knowing he was failing him. He asked about you 17 times between 7 and 9. Ethan turned to find Ava standing in the hallway behind him, her arms crossed over her chest. She wasn't smiling. She rarely smiled at him anymore. I got held up. You always get held up. Ava's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath the softness. That boy worships you, Mr. Cole. The least you could do is pretend to care about that. I do care. Then show up. It's not complicated. She walked past him toward the kitchen, her shoulder brushing his arm. Even that small contact felt charged with disapproval. Ethan followed her, his jaw tight. I'm running a billion-dollar company. Sometimes that requires everyone's running something. Ava was already at the sink, washing the dinner dishes that he paid a housekeeper to wash. But she always did them herself anyway. The difference is most people remember they have a kid who needs them more than their stock portfolio does. You don't know anything about my situation. I know enough. She didn't look at him, just kept scrubbing a pot with focused intensity. I know you weren't there for his school presentation last week where he talked about wanting to be just like his daddy when he grows up. I know you missed his soccer game on Saturday, even though you promised him you'd come. I know he asks me every single morning if today's the day you'll have breakfast with him, and I have to watch his face fall when you're already gone before he wakes up. Each accusation landed like a punch. Ethan wanted to defend himself, to explain about the acquisition, the broken code, the impossible pressure he was under. But standing in his kitchen watching this woman, this poor woman he paid barely enough to cover her rent, wash his dishes, and call him out on his failures as a father, the excuses died in his throat. I'm doing the best I can, he said finally. Ava turned off the water and dried her hands on a towel. When she looked at him, her eyes were sad rather than angry, and somehow that was worse. No, you're not. You're doing the bare minimum and telling yourself it's enough because writing a check is easier than showing up. She hung the towel on the oven handle. But that little boy doesn't need your money, Mr. Cole. He's got more of that than he'll ever use. He needs his father. She walked past him again, heading toward the small room off the kitchen that served as her bedroom. She lived here 5 days a week, caring for Liam while Ethan built his empire and pretended he was doing it all for his son's future. Ava. She stopped but didn't turn around. Thank you for waiting with him, for the cookies, for everything. I don't do it for you. Her voice was quiet. I do it for him, because somebody should. The door to her room closed softly, and Ethan was alone again. Mitch. The next morning, Ethan woke to the smell of pancakes. For a disorienting moment, he thought he was back in his marriage, back when mornings meant family breakfast and his biggest concern was making it to the office by 9. Then reality settled back over him like a cold blanket. He found Liam at the kitchen table, syrup all over his face, chattering to Ava about something that had happened in his dream. Ava was listening with complete attention, asking questions and laughing at his 6-year-old logic. She looked tired. There were shadows under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept well. But she was present in a way Ethan had forgotten how to be. Morning, buddy, Ethan said, ruffling Liam's hair as he passed. Daddy! Liam's face lit up. Ava made pancakes. Do you want some? They have chocolate chips. I have an early meeting. You could eat fast, Liam said, hopefully. I could talk really fast so you don't miss anything important. Ethan looked at his son, then at Ava, who was very deliberately not looking at him. He thought about the conversation last night, about the crumpled note, about the fact that he couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten breakfast with his son. You know what? The meeting can wait 15 minutes. Liam's entire face transformed. Really? Really. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat down. Tell me about this dream. Ava set a plate of pancakes in front of him without a word, but when their eyes met briefly, something passed between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe acknowledgement. It was a start. 15 minutes turned into 25, and Ethan found himself actually listening as Liam explained his elaborate dream about fighting dragons with a sword made of lightning. The kid had an imagination that never quit. When had Ethan stopped noticing that? I gotta go to school now, Liam announced, checking the dinosaur watch on his wrist that told time he couldn't actually read yet. But can we do this tomorrow too? Yeah, buddy, we can do this tomorrow. Promise? Ethan hesitated. He'd broken so many promises already, but Liam was looking at him with those wide, hopeful eyes, and Ethan couldn't bring himself to add another disappointment to the pile. I promise. Ava drove Liam to school, one of her many responsibilities that Ethan paid her for, but never thanked her enough for. The penthouse felt hollow after they left. Ethan stood in the kitchen, looking at the breakfast dishes and the half-eaten pancakes on Liam's plate, and felt something shift inside his chest. He was doing this wrong. All of it. The company's success meant nothing if he lost his son in the process. His phone buzzed with the text from his head engineer. Still no progress on the bug. Meeting at 10 to discuss alternatives. Alternatives. That was corporate speak for "we're screwed." Ethan grabbed his laptop and headed to his home office. He had 3 hours before the meeting. Maybe if he looked at the code with fresh eyes, he'd see something his team had missed. Check. 4 hours later, Ethan was ready to throw his laptop through the window. The bug was impossible. It made no sense. The code should work. Everyone agreed the code should work. But somewhere in the interaction between 3 different systems, something was breaking down in a way that defied logic. His phone rang. The lead investor on the acquisition. "Tell me you have good news, Cole." "We're close to a solution," Ethan lied. "You said that 3 days ago. The seller's getting nervous. If we can't guarantee the platform is stable, they're going to walk. And if they walk, we lose the entire Asian market opportunity." "I understand the stakes." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your golden boy reputation might be tarnished. Maybe you're not the genius everyone thinks you are." The line went dead. Ethan set his phone down carefully, resisting the urge to throw it. His hands were shaking. From stress or anger or fear, he couldn't tell anymore. Maybe all 3. He looked at the code again, stared at it until the lines blurred together. Then he got up, paced the office, sat back down and stared some more. Nothing. At 6 p.m., he called his team. "I need everyone back in the office. We're pulling an all-nighter." "Ethan, we've been staring at this for weeks. One more night isn't going to—" "One more night is all we have. Be there in an hour." He hung up and immediately felt guilty. His team had families too, lives too. But the alternative was watching $300 million disappear because he couldn't solve one impossible problem. The penthouse door opened. Ava and Liam were back from soccer practice. "Daddy!" Liam ran to him. "I scored a goal." "Well, almost. I kicked it really hard, but it went over the net. Coach said I have powerful legs." "That's great, buddy." Ethan's mind was still half on the code. "Listen, I have to go back to the office, but you promised breakfast tomorrow." Liam's face crumpled. "You promised, and we'll do breakfast. I just have to work tonight." "You always have to work." Liam's voice rose to a shout. "You promise things and then you don't do them, and I hate it." "Liam, I hate it." Tears were streaming down his face now. "I wish you weren't my daddy anymore." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He watched his son run to his room, heard the door slam, and felt something inside him break. Ava was standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Go ahead," Ethan said bitterly. "Tell me I'm a terrible father. I already know." "I wasn't going to say that." "Then what?" She walked past him into the kitchen, started unpacking groceries. "I was going to say that little boy loves you more than anything in this world, and you're breaking his heart every single day. Not because you're terrible, but because you're too scared to let yourself be anything other than busy." "That's not—" "When's the last time you did something just because it made you happy? Not for the company, not to prove something, just because it felt good?" She turned to face him. "You're so busy building this empire that you've forgotten what you're building it for." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Because she was right. When was the last time? He couldn't remember. "I have to solve this problem tonight, or I lose everything." "You already are losing everything." Ava's voice was gentle now. "You just can't see it yet." She left him standing there, and for the second night in a row, Ethan was alone with his failures. He went to the office. Spent 6 hours going over the code with his exhausted team. Got nowhere. At 2 a.m., he sent everyone home and stayed by himself, staring at his computer screen until the numbers and symbols stopped making sense. At 3 a.m., his phone died. He'd forgotten his charger. Ethan drove home into the pre-dawn darkness, his eyes burning, his head pounding, his entire body aching from stress and lack of sleep. The penthouse was silent when he entered. He headed straight for his office to grab his spare charger. The door was ajar. He never left it ajar. Ethan pushed it open slowly, and his blood turned to ice. Ava was sitting at his desk, his laptop open in front of her, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "What the hell are you doing?" She jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "Mr. Cole, I was just—" Get away from my computer. Now. His voice was deadly quiet. Ava stood up quickly, holding her hands up. I'm sorry. I just came in to get a phone charger and I saw… You saw what? Private company information? Confidential code? What were you doing on my laptop? He was advancing on her now, fury overwhelming every other emotion. I trusted you with my son and you repay me by stealing… I wasn't stealing anything. Her voice rose to match his. I was fixing it. Fixing what? Your bug. She pointed at the screen. The one that's been keeping you up at night for weeks. The reason you keep breaking promises to Liam. I saw it on your screen and I… She stopped, seeming to realize how this sounded. Ethan stared at her, then at his laptop, then back at her. You fixed my bug, he said slowly. The bug that 15 of the best engineers in Seattle can't solve. You fixed it. I think so, yes. In the middle of the night, while looking for a phone charger. I know how it sounds. You know how it sounds? Ethan's laugh was harsh. It sounds insane. You're a nanny. You didn't even go to college. How could you possibly… I taught myself. Her chin lifted defiantly. Libraries are free. Online courses are free. YouTube tutorials are free. Just because I couldn't afford a fancy education doesn't mean I'm stupid. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. He walked to his desk, looked at the screen. At first glance, the code looked the same. Then he started reading more carefully. She'd changed maybe 50 lines, added 3 functions he hadn't thought of, restructured the data flow in a way that was so obvious in hindsight that he wanted to punch himself for missing it. And unless he was completely wrong, it would work. How did you… He couldn't finish the sentence. I've been watching you work for 6 months. Ava's voice was quieter now. Your laptop's always open when I bring you coffee. I got curious about what you were doing, so I started teaching myself. It's like solving puzzles. I'm good at puzzles. Ethan sat down slowly in his desk chair. His mind was racing, trying to process what he was seeing. Run it, Ava said softly. Test it. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize and never touch your things again. But if I'm right… Her voice trailed off, but the implication hung in the air between them. Ethan's hands were shaking as he pulled up the testing environment. He compiled the code, held his breath, hit run. The system executed perfectly. No errors, no crashes, no mysterious failures. He ran it again. Same result. A third time. Same result. Oh my God, he whispered. Did it work? Ava's voice was small, almost nervous. Ethan looked up at her. Really looked at her for the first time since she'd started working for him. Not as the nanny, not as the help, but as a person standing in his office at 3 a.m. who had just solved a problem that had stumped his entire company. You just saved a $300 million deal. Ava's eyes widened. I did? Yeah. Ethan ran his hands through his hair, a laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep in his chest. A real laugh, the kind he'd forgotten he was capable of. Yeah, you really did. They stared at each other in the dim office light. Outside, dawn was starting to break over Seattle. Inside, something had shifted that neither of them fully understood yet. I should go, Ava said finally. I'm sorry for using your computer without permission. I just saw the problem and I couldn't help myself. Don't apologize. Ethan stood up. I should be thanking you. I should be… He trailed off, not sure what he should be doing. His entire worldview had just been turned upside down. Get some sleep, Mr. Cole. You look exhausted. She left quietly, and Ethan sat alone in his office as the sun rose, staring at the code on his screen and thinking about library books and free online classes and a woman who had been invisible to him for 6 months while being smarter than half his engineering department. Ethan called an emergency morning meeting with his team at 8 a.m. He was running on 3 hours of sleep and enough adrenaline to power a small city. The bug is fixed, he announced without preamble. His lead engineer blinked. What? The bug. It's fixed. I'm sending you the updated code now. The room erupted in chaos as everyone pulled up the code on their laptops, started running tests, comparing notes. Ethan watched their faces go from skepticism to confusion to stunned relief. How did you do this? Someone asked. When did you do this? Someone else added. That data restructure is brilliant, his lead engineer said slowly. Why didn't we think of this? I didn't, Ethan said. Someone else did. Who? Ethan hesitated. He could take the credit. No one would ever know. But he thought about Ava's hands flying over his keyboard, about library books and free courses, about the quiet determination in her voice when she'd said she was good at puzzles. I'll introduce you later. Right now, let's make sure this actually works in production. It took 6 hours of rigorous testing, but the code held. It didn't just work. It improved system performance by 18% across the board. The acquisition deal was saved. The Asian market opportunity was back on track. And Ethan's reputation as a genius was intact, except he wasn't the genius. His son's nanny was. That night, Ethan came home at 6 p.m. on purpose. Liam nearly fell over in shock. You're here! I promised breakfast tomorrow, remember? Figured I should actually be here to deliver on that promise. Liam launched himself at Ethan's legs, hugging him so tightly it hurt. Ethan picked him up, even though Liam was getting too big for that, and carried him to the kitchen where Ava was making dinner. She looked up when they entered, her expression guarded. You're home early, she said carefully. The crisis is over, thanks to you. She turned back to the stove. I'm glad it worked. It more than worked. It was brilliant. It was obvious. To you, maybe. Ethan set Liam down and watched his son run off to play with his toys. Can we talk? After Liam goes to bed? Ava's shoulders tensed. If this is about me using your computer, it's not. I mean, it is, but not the way you think. He paused. Please? She nodded slowly. Okay. The rest of the evening was almost normal. Ethan had dinner with Liam, helped with bath time, read 3 bedtime stories instead of the usual one. By the time Liam finally fell asleep, Ethan felt more like a father than he had in months. He found Ava in the kitchen cleaning up. Always cleaning, always working, always taking care of the details he never noticed. You don't have to do that, he said. We have a housekeeper. I like doing it. Keeps my hands busy. She didn't look at him. What did you want to talk about? Ethan pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. Sit, please. She dried her hands and sat across from him, her posture defensive. How long have you been teaching yourself programming? About 3 years, since before I started working here. Why? Ava shrugged. I like understanding how things work, and it seemed useful. Tech jobs pay better than cleaning houses, which is what I was doing before this. Why didn't you go to college? Study it properly? Her laugh was bitter. College costs money, Mr. Cole. Money I didn't have. My parents died when I was 19, left me with a 14-year-old sister and a pile of medical debt. So instead of college, I got 2 jobs and figured out how to keep us both alive. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. I didn't know. Why would you? You never asked about my life. I'm just the help. You're not... He stopped. Because hadn't that been exactly how he'd treated her? As a convenient service he paid for? You're right. I've been an ass. That surprised her into looking up. I didn't say that. But it's true. He leaned forward. I've been so focused on my own problems that I never saw you, really saw you. And that's my failure, not yours. What's this about, Mr. Cole? I want to offer you a job. A real job. In my company. We need people who can think the way you think, solve problems the way you solve them. Ava's expression shuddered immediately. I'm not looking for charity. It's not charity. You'd be earning it. You saved us $300 million last night. That's worth more than... No. She stood up abruptly. Thank you for the offer, but no. Why not? Because I know how this works. Rich guy feels guilty, offers the poor girl a handout, everyone feels better about themselves, and nothing actually changes. Her voice was sharp. I don't need you to rescue me, Mr. Cole. I'm doing fine on my own. I'm not trying to rescue you. Then what are you trying to do? She crossed her arms. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just discovered your nanny isn't completely stupid, and now you want to parade that around like some kind of trophy. Look, everyone, I'm not a snob. I hired the poor girl. The accusation stung because there was a kernel of truth in it. Ethan had been thinking about how good it would look, bringing in someone with Ava's background. A feel-good story for the press. You're right, he said quietly. I wasn't thinking about what you wanted. I was thinking about what would make me look good. That seemed to surprise her again. Oh, For what it's worth, the offer is genuine. You're brilliant. My company would be lucky to have you. But I understand if you don't trust that coming from me." He stood up. "I'm sorry for treating you like you were invisible, for not seeing how hard you work or how talented you are. You deserved better." He started to leave the kitchen, but her voice stopped him. "Mr. Cole?" "Yeah?" "Did you mean what you said about breakfast tomorrow?" "I did. I'm going to try harder, with Liam, with everything." Something in her expression softened. "That's all he wants, for you to try." "I know. I'm starting to understand that." After she left, Ethan sat alone in his kitchen thinking about invisible people and missed opportunities and the strange turn his life had just taken. He'd spent 6 months working side by side with someone extraordinary and had never bothered to notice. What else had he been missing? Ethan kept his promise about breakfast. He showed up at the table the next morning with wet hair and wrinkled clothes because he'd overslept his alarm. But he was there. Liam's face when he saw his father sitting at the kitchen table was worth every minute of lost sleep. "You came!" Liam scrambled into his chair so fast he nearly knocked over his juice. "I told you I would. But you tell me lots of things." Liam said it matter-of-factly, without accusation, which somehow made it worse. Ava set a plate of scrambled eggs in front of Ethan without comment. Their eyes met briefly. She'd pulled her dark hair back in a ponytail, and there were still shadows under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept well either. He wondered if she'd been up thinking about their conversation, about his clumsy job offer, and her sharp rejection. "These eggs are really good," Ethan said, taking a bite. "Ava taught me how to crack them," Liam announced proudly. "I only got a little bit of shell in the bowl." "We fished it out," Ava added, the corner of her mouth twitching slightly. It was such a small moment, such a normal moment, and Ethan realized he'd been missing thousands of them. All these little pieces of his son's life that were happening without him, while he sat in his office solving problems that suddenly seemed a lot less important. After breakfast, Ava drove Liam to school like always, and Ethan went to his office like always, except nothing felt like always anymore. He couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said, about library books and free classes and teaching yourself skills because you had no other choice, about raising a sister at 19 while drowning in medical debt. He pulled up Ava's employment file. The background check his company had run was standard: criminal history, credit check, references. All clean. But it told him nothing about who she actually was. Just that she'd worked as a house cleaner for 3 years before applying to be Liam's nanny, that she lived in a studio apartment in a neighborhood Ethan had never visited, and that she'd listed her younger sister as her emergency contact. He closed the file, feeling like a creep for even looking. His phone buzzed with a text from his lead engineer. "Investor meeting at 2. They want to see the fix in action." Right. The fix that Ava had created while looking for a phone charger. The fix that was about to make Ethan look like a hero to a room full of people who had no idea the hero was actually a 30-year-old woman who taught herself programming from YouTube videos. He should tell them. He should walk into that meeting and give credit where it was due. But even as he thought it, Ethan knew he wouldn't. Because explaining how his nanny had solved a problem his engineers couldn't would raise too many questions he didn't want to answer. It would make him look incompetent, make his team look incompetent, and possibly tank the entire deal if the investors lost confidence. So he took the credit, walked into that meeting, demonstrated the fix, accepted the congratulations, and the backslapping and the comments about his genius with a smile that felt like broken glass in his mouth. "You pulled off a miracle, Cole," the lead investor said, shaking his hand. "We were ready to walk. You saved this deal." "Just doing my job," Ethan replied automatically. Except he hadn't. Ava had. And he was letting everyone believe otherwise. The guilt followed him home that evening. He'd promised himself he'd be better, be more present, be more honest. And here he was on day 2, already failing. Liam was doing homework at the kitchen table when Ethan walked in at 7:30. Ava was helping him with math problems, her patience apparently infinite as Liam struggled with subtraction. "But why does the number get smaller when you take away?" Liam asked, frustrated. "That doesn't make sense." "Okay, look." Ava grabbed a handful of grapes from the fruit bowl. "You have 10 grapes. If you eat 3 grapes, how many are left?" Liam counted carefully. 7. "Right. The number got smaller because you took some away. That's subtraction." "Oh." Liam's face cleared. "Can I eat the grapes now?" "After homework." "Ava, You're mean. I know, I'm terrible. But she was smiling as she said it, and Liam was smiling back, and Ethan felt like an intruder in his own kitchen watching this easy warmth between them. "How was your day, buddy?" Ethan asked, pulling out a chair. "Good. We learned about frogs, and Tommy brought his pet frog to class, but then it escaped, and we had to catch it, and Mrs. Henderson screamed really loud." The words tumbled out in an excited rush. "Can I have a pet frog?" "We'll see." "That means no," Liam said to Ava. "Usually does," she agreed. After Liam finished his homework and was settled in front of the TV with his grapes, Ethan found himself alone in the kitchen with Ava again. She was wiping down the counters, her movements efficient and practiced. "I wanted to tell you something," Ethan said. She glanced up warily. "Okay. The investors saw the fix today. The deal is moving forward. Everyone's thrilled." He paused. "I didn't tell them you were the one who solved it." Ava's hand stilled on the counter. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I feel guilty about it. Because you deserve credit, and I took it instead." He ran his hand through his hair. "Because I'm trying to be more honest, and that starts with admitting when I screw up." "You didn't screw up. You made a business decision." Her voice was neutral. "I get it." "Do you?" "Mr. Cole, I've been poor my whole life. I know how the world works. Rich people take credit for things. Poor people do the work, and everyone pretends that's fair." She went back to wiping the counter. "I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed I thought you might be different." The words stung because they were true. "I am trying to be different." Trying isn't the same as doing. She left the kitchen, and Ethan sat there feeling like he'd failed another test he hadn't known he was taking. Over the next few days, something strange started happening. Ethan found himself testing Ava. Not consciously at first, but once he realized what he was doing, he couldn't stop. He left a complicated spreadsheet open on his laptop in the kitchen, the kind with broken formulas and circular references that made his accountant weep. When he came back an hour later, all the errors were fixed and there was a post-it note stuck to the screen. Your index/match formulas were a mess. Fix them. Also, you're using way too many nested IFs. Check column G for a cleaner solution. He left code with deliberate bugs scattered through it. She found every single one and left notes in the comments that were equal parts helpful and mocking, //. "This function doesn't do what you think it does. See line 47. And later, //. "Pretty sure you meant equals equals, not equals. But what do I know? I just taught myself from library books." He left a damaged database that his team had spent 2 days trying to repair. She fixed it in 45 minutes and left a sticky note that said, "Your schema design needs work. Also, index your queries." This was painful to watch. Each time, Ethan felt a mixture of amazement and shame. Amazement because Ava wasn't just competent, she was better than most of the people he paid 6 figures. Shame because he'd spent 6 months treating her like she was nothing more than a convenient service. On Friday evening, he came home to find Ava standing in his office doorway with her arms crossed and an expression that could freeze water. "Are you messing with me?" she demanded. "What?" "The broken spreadsheet, the buggy code, the corrupted database." She ticked them off on her fingers. "You're leaving this stuff out on purpose." "Why?" Ethan had been caught. He could lie, make an excuse, but he was trying to be better. "I wanted to see if you could actually do it, consistently. It wasn't just luck." "So you were testing me?" Her voice was flat. "Yes." "Without asking, without telling me, just leaving traps around your apartment to see if the poor girl could solve them." When she put it like that, it sounded terrible. "I didn't think of it as what? As treating me like a performing monkey?" Her eyes flashed. "Here's a thought, Mr. Cole. If you wanted to know if I could do something, you could have asked me directly instead of playing games." "You're right. I know I'm right." She turned to leave, then spun back around. "And another thing, those notes you've been leaving, the ones asking for help with problems your team can't solve, I'm not doing those anymore." Ethan's heart sank. He had been leaving notes, actual requests for help disguised as casual questions. "Ava, I'm your son's nanny, not your free consulting service. You want my help? Offer me a real job with real pay. Otherwise, stop using me." She walked away, and Ethan stood in his office feeling like the world's biggest idiot. The The problem was, she wasn't wrong about any of it. He'd been using her, telling himself it was harmless curiosity when really it was exploitation dressed up in post-it notes. That night, Ethan barely slept. He kept thinking about Ava's face when she'd confronted him, about the anger and hurt underneath her words. She'd trusted him with his son, had been nothing but professional and kind to Liam, and he'd repaid that by treating her like a puzzle to solve rather than a person to respect. The next morning was Saturday. Ava had weekends off, which meant Ethan was on his own with Liam. Usually, he tried to work from home while Liam entertained himself, but today felt different. Today, he actually wanted to be present. "What do you want to do today, buddy?" Liam looked up from his cereal, suspicious. "You're asking me?" "Yeah, I'm asking you. But you always have work." "Not today. Today is just us, so what sounds fun?" Liam's face transformed. "The Science Museum. They have a new dinosaur exhibit, and Ava said she'd take me, but she's not here today, and the Science Museum it is." They spent 4 hours at the museum. Liam dragged Ethan through every exhibit, asking a million questions that Ethan didn't know the answers to, but tried to answer anyway. They built a robot together in the engineering lab, launched paper rockets, and stood underneath a suspended T-Rex skeleton while Liam explained everything he knew about dinosaurs with the confidence of a 6-year-old expert. "Did you know the T-Rex couldn't actually roar?" Liam informed him seriously. "Ava told me they probably made sounds more like birds because they're related to birds, even though that seems weird." "Ava told you that?" "Ava tells me lots of things. She's really smart." Liam tugged on Ethan's hand. "Can we get lunch? I'm starving." They ate overpriced museum pizza, and Ethan listened to his son chatter about everything and nothing, and realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd done this. Just existed with Liam without checking his phone every 5 minutes or thinking about work. "This is the best day ever," Liam announced through a mouthful of pepperoni. "Yeah? Yeah, you should not work more often." Ethan laughed. "I'll try, buddy." On the drive home, Liam fell asleep in his car seat, exhausted from the museum. Ethan glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Sticky fingers, messy hair, a smile still on his sleeping face, and felt something crack open in his chest. This was what he'd been missing, this simple, perfect, ordinary day with his son. And he'd almost let his obsession with work steal all of it. Monday morning, Ethan was waiting in the kitchen when Ava arrived at 6:30. She looked surprised to see him up so early. "Mr. Cole, I owe you an apology." He'd rehearsed this. "A real one, not the half-hearted thing I said the other night." Ava set her bag down slowly. "Okay. You were right about all of it. I was using you, testing you, treating you like a resource instead of a person." He took a breath. "And I'm sorry. It was wrong, and you deserved better." She studied his face for a long moment. "Are you going to stop?" "Yes." "Just like that?" "Just like that." He paused. "I spent Saturday with Liam at the Science Museum. He told me about a dozen things you taught him, and I realized you've been doing more than just watching my kid. You've been raising him in all the ways I haven't." Ava's expression softened slightly. "He's a good kid. Easy to teach." "He is, and that's partly because of you." Ethan hesitated. "I meant what I said about the job offer. Not as charity, not as some publicity stunt, but because you're genuinely talented and my company needs people like you. But I understand if you don't trust that coming from me." "I don't," she said bluntly. "Not yet." "Fair enough." He grabbed his briefcase. "For what it's worth, I'm going to try to earn that trust. No more tests, no more games, just honesty." "We'll see," Ava said, but her tone was less sharp than before. It was a start. The following week, Ethan had a massive company event scheduled at his penthouse. A networking thing for investors and executives, the kind of evening he normally dreaded but tolerated because it was good for business. Usually Ava took Liam out during these events, got him dinner somewhere, and brought him back after the crowds left. But this time, one of the guests arrived early, Marcus Chen, a venture capitalist with more money than sense and an ego to match. Ethan was still setting up when Marcus walked in uninvited, already on his second scotch based on the smell. "Cole, hell of a place you've got here." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder too hard. "Heard about that miracle fix you pulled off. Saved the Asia deal, didn't you?" "Something like that." "Brilliant work." "That's why I backed you, you know." You've got instincts these code monkeys from Stanford don't have. Ethan forced a smile. Marcus was an important investor, which meant he had to be tolerated even when he was insufferable. The door opened and Ava walked in with Liam, back from picking him up from school. She froze when she saw Marcus. "Oh, sorry, Mr. Cole. I didn't realize your guests were here already." "They're not supposed to be," Ethan said pointedly, looking at Marcus. But Marcus wasn't paying attention to Ethan. He was looking at Ava with the kind of dismissive once-over that made Ethan's jaw tighten. "The help, I presume?" Marcus said. "Tell me, sweetheart, where's the kitchen? I need a refill." Ava's face went carefully blank. "Through that door." "You're not going to offer to get it for me?" Marcus's tone was joking, but there was an edge underneath. "I'm the nanny, not the bartender." "Ava," Ethan said quietly, "why don't you take Liam to his room?" She nodded and ushered Liam away quickly, but not before Ethan saw the flash of anger in her eyes. Liam was asking questions as they left, his young voice curious about why the man was being rude to Ava. "Bit uppity for a nanny, isn't she?" Marcus said once they were gone. "She's good at her job, I'm sure." Marcus refilled his own drink. "But you want to watch that. Give the help too much rope, and they start thinking they're equal. Next thing you know, she'll be demanding a raise and asking for weekends off." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "Ava already has weekends off, and she's not the help. She's an employee I value." "Employee," Marcus laughed. "That's rich. She's a nanny, Cole. Glorified babysitter. Don't get soft just because she's easy on the eyes." Before Ethan could respond, other guests started arriving, and he had to play host. But Marcus's words stayed with him, sour in his mouth. This was his world. These were the people he did business with, the people whose money funded his company. And they were casually cruel in a way he'd stopped noticing until Ava held up a mirror. The event went late. By the time the last guest left around 11, Ethan was exhausted and angry in equal measure. He'd had to listen to Marcus hold court all evening, making jokes at the expense of anyone he deemed beneath him. The wait staff, the catering company, even Ethan's assistant who'd stopped by briefly. He found Ava in Liam's room reading to him even though it was past his bedtime. "Is the scary man gone?" Liam asked when Ethan appeared in the doorway. "He's gone, buddy." "Good. I didn't like him. He was mean to Ava." "I didn't like him either," Ethan admitted. After Liam finally fell asleep, Ethan found Ava in the kitchen cleaning up the glasses the caterers had missed. She didn't look up when he entered. "You don't have to do that." "I know." She kept washing. "I'm sorry about Marcus. He was out of line." "He was honest." Ava set a glass in the dish rack. "That's how people like him see people like me. As the help. As beneath them." "He's an ass." "He's rich and powerful, which means he gets to be an ass without consequences." She finally looked at Ethan. "You think he's unique? He's not. He's just willing to say out loud what most of your friends think quietly." "They're not my friends." "Business associates, then. Same difference." She dried her hands. "That's why I can't take your job offer, Mr. Cole, because I've seen your world now. I've watched how people like Marcus operate, how they look at people like me. And I don't want any part of it. Not everyone is like that." "Enough are." She headed toward her room, then paused. "Your son asked me tonight if all rich people were mean. You know what I told him?" Ethan shook his head. "I told him his daddy wasn't, that you were trying to be better." Her eyes met his. "Don't make me a liar." She closed her door, and Ethan stood alone in his kitchen thinking about Marcus Chen and casual cruelty and the fact that he'd been friends with people like that for years without really seeing what they were. The next morning, Ethan called Marcus. "Chen, it's Ethan Cole. I need to talk to you about last night." "Great party, wasn't it? Your nanny ever loosen up, or is she always that uptight?" "I'm pulling my company from your investment portfolio." Silence. Then, "What?" "You heard me. I don't want your money anymore. I'll buy out your shares at market value, but we're done." "Are you insane? Do you know what I've done for your company?" "I do, and I'm grateful. But I'm also not going to work with someone who treats my employees the way you treated Ava last night." Marcus laughed. "You're tanking a multi-million-dollar investment relationship over a nanny?" "Over basic human decency, yeah." "You're making a mistake, Cole." "Probably, but it's my mistake to make." Ethan hung up before Marcus could respond. His hands were shaking. He'd just cost himself roughly $15 million in immediate capital and potentially more in future opportunities. Marcus was connected, influential. He'd spread word that Ethan was difficult to work with, unstable. But Ethan looked at himself in the reflection of his office window and saw someone he didn't completely hate, for the first time in a long while. His phone rang, his CFO. "Please tell me you didn't just dump Marcus Chen." "I did." "Are you out of your mind? We needed that capital for the expansion." "We'll find other investors." "Other investors who don't mind that you torched a relationship over nothing?" "It wasn't nothing." "Ethan, I'm not arguing about this. Find me investors who aren't casually cruel to service workers, or I'll find them myself." He hung up and immediately wondered if he'd just destroyed his company. But then he thought about Liam asking if all rich people were mean, and Ava telling his son that Ethan wasn't, and he knew he'd made the right call, even if it cost him everything. Later that evening, Ava cornered him in his office. "Did you really fire Marcus Chen?" "He's an investor, not an employee. But yes, I cut ties with him." "Why?" "Because he was rude to you, and because I'm tired of pretending people like that are acceptable just because they have money." Ava stared at him. "You just lost millions of dollars. 15 million, give or take. Over me? Over basic decency. You were right about my world, about how people operate in it, and I'm done being complicit in that just because it's profitable." She sank into the chair across from his desk. "You're insane." "Probably. Your company could tank." "It could." Ethan leaned back. "But Liam asked me last night if all rich people were mean, and you told him I wasn't. I figured I should try to live up to that." Something shifted in Ava's expression. The wall she kept between them cracked just slightly. "That was incredibly stupid." "Yeah. And kind of amazing." Ethan smiled. "Yeah? Don't let it go to your head." But she was almost smiling too. "For the record, I still don't trust you completely." "I know. But maybe you're not totally hopeless." "I'll take it." She stood up to leave, then hesitated in the doorway. "Thank you for standing up for me. No one's ever done that before." "They should have," Ethan said quietly. After she left, Ethan sat in his office and thought about bridges burned and principles rediscovered, and the strange way his life was reshaping itself around this woman who kept challenging him to be better than he'd ever bothered to be before. The fallout from cutting Marcus Chen was worse than Ethan expected. By the end of the week, 3 other investors had pulled out, spooked by what they called his erratic behavior. His CFO quit. 2 board members demanded an emergency meeting to discuss his fitness to lead. Ethan sat through that meeting listening to men in expensive suits tell him he'd lost perspective, that he was letting personal feelings interfere with business decisions, that a company couldn't be run on principles alone. "You're right," he said when they finally stopped talking. "A company can't be run on principles alone, but it also can't be run without them. And if the price of keeping investors like Marcus Chen is tolerating how he treats people, then I don't want his money." "This isn't about one investor," Donald Prescott said. He was the oldest board member, a man who'd known Ethan's father. "This is about you making emotional decisions that affect everyone who works for this company. You have responsibilities." "I know." "Do you? Because from where we're sitting, it looks like you're having some kind of crisis and taking the whole company down with you." Ethan wanted to argue, but the truth was they weren't entirely wrong. He was making emotional decisions. He was changing the rules he'd operated under for years. And he couldn't fully explain why, except that watching Marcus Chen treat Ava like she was worthless had made him physically ill. "I'll find new investors," Ethan said finally. "Better ones. Give me 30 days. And if you can't, then you can vote me out. But I'm not apologizing for having standards." The meeting ended badly. Ethan went home at 3 in the afternoon, something he never did, and found Ava in the kitchen making cookies with Liam. They both looked up in surprise when he walked in. "You're home early," Ava said carefully. "Rough day." Liam abandoned his cookie dough and threw himself at Ethan's legs. "Can you help us? We're making chocolate chip cookies, but Ava says I can't eat all the dough even though it tastes really good." "Raw eggs will make you sick, buddy." "That's what Ava said." Liam looked betrayed by this conspiracy. Ethan picked him up even though his arms were tired and his head was pounding. "You want to know a secret?" Liam nodded eagerly. When I was your age, I ate cookie dough all the time and never got sick, so maybe just one more bite. Ethan, Ava said warningly. What? I'm teaching him about calculated risks. You're teaching him to ignore safety rules. Same thing. But Ethan was smiling despite everything, and when Ava rolled her eyes at him, he felt something warm settle in his chest. They spent the afternoon making cookies. Well, Ava made cookies while Ethan and Liam mostly made a mess, but nobody seemed to mind. Liam chattered constantly about school and his friends and a game he wanted to play, and Ethan listened and responded and tried not to think about the company crisis waiting for him. After Liam went to bed, Ava found Ethan standing on the balcony staring out at the Seattle skyline. The city lights stretched out below like scattered stars. Want to talk about it? She asked. Not really. She leaned against the railing beside him. The board meeting didn't go well. How did you be? You came home at 3 in the afternoon looking like someone kicked your dog. Doesn't take a genius to figure out something went wrong. Ethan laughed without humor. They think I'm having a breakdown, that I'm making reckless decisions that could destroy the company. Are you? Maybe. He rubbed his face. I don't know anymore. I used to be so sure about everything. Business was business. You made decisions based on profit and growth and market share. Feelings didn't enter into it. What changed? You did. He looked at her. Watching Marcus treat you like you were nothing and realizing I'd been friends with people like that for years without caring, it made me see everything differently. Ava was quiet for a long moment. The wind whipped her hair around her face, and she pushed it back absently. You know you can't save the world by firing a few jerks, right? I know. And you definitely can't save me. I don't need saving. I know that too. Then what are you doing? Ethan turned to face her fully. Trying to be someone my son won't be ashamed of. Trying to build something that matters instead of just something that makes money. Trying to figure out who I am when I'm not just the guy who wins. That's a lot of trying. Yeah. He smiled slightly. Doesn't mean I'm succeeding. No, Ava agreed. But at least you're trying. That's more than most people do. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, and Ethan realized this was becoming a pattern. These quiet moments with Ava, where he didn't have to pretend to have all the answers, where he could just be tired and uncertain and still feel okay. I should go to bed, Ava said finally. Early morning tomorrow. Ava? She paused. Thank you. For the cookies, for listening. For not telling me I'm an idiot even though I probably am. You're welcome. She started to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. With Marcus, it was stupid and costly and probably going to cause you all kinds of problems, but it was right. She left him on the balcony, and Ethan stood there thinking that maybe stupid and right was better than smart and wrong. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Ethan worked 18-hour days trying to find new investors, pitching the company to anyone who would listen. He struck out more often than not. Word had spread about the Marcus Chen situation, and potential investors were wary. I heard you're unreliable, one venture capitalist said bluntly during a pitch meeting, that you make decisions based on personal grudges rather than sound business strategy. I make decisions based on values, Ethan corrected. Same thing, in my experience. The man closed his portfolio. I'm going to pass. Ethan kept his breakfast promise to Liam, but there were mornings when he was so exhausted he could barely keep his eyes open. Ava started making him coffee without being asked, strong enough to strip paint, and leaving it on the table with a look that said she knew exactly how close to the edge he was running. You need to sleep, she told him one morning after Liam left for school. I need to save my company. You need to not die of a heart attack before you're 40. She crossed her arms. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? I don't know. Tuesday? That was 6 days ago. Was it? Time had become elastic, measured in pitch meetings and rejected proposals rather than days of the week. Ava grabbed his coffee cup before he could drink it. You're taking a nap. I have a meeting at 11. I'll wake you at 10:30. That gives you 3 hours. She pointed toward his bedroom. Go. You can't just order me around. I'm your boss. And I'm the person making sure you don't collapse in front of your kid. Go to bed, Mr. Cole. Ethan was too tired to argue. He stumbled to his room, fully intending to lie down for 20 minutes and then get back to work. Instead, He crashed hard and didn't wake up until Ava shook his shoulder at 10:15. "You have 45 minutes," she said. "I moved your meeting to 11:30. "You're welcome." He blinked at her groggily. "How did you— Your assistant's number is in your phone. I told her you were sick and needed to reschedule. She was very understanding." "You pretended to be me." "I pretended to be your assistant. There's a difference." Ava set a fresh cup of coffee on his nightstand. "Now get up and shower. You look like death." After she left, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, holding the coffee, and trying to remember the last time someone had taken care of him like this. Not as an employee doing a job, but as a person who actually seemed to care whether he burned himself out. He couldn't. The meeting at 11:30 was with a small investment firm out of Portland. Ethan wasn't expecting much. They managed maybe a tenth of what Marcus Chen's fund did, but he was running out of options. "I'll be honest with you, Cole," the senior partner said after Ethan finished his pitch. "We heard about the Marcus Chen situation." Here it comes, Ethan thought. "And we liked what we heard." Ethan blinked. "You did?" "Chen's a bully who's gotten away with terrible behavior for years because he has money. Standing up to him took guts." The woman leaned forward. "We're interested in companies with strong values and leadership that backs those values up with action. So yes, we're interested. Let's talk numbers." Ethan walked out of that meeting with a provisional commitment for $12 million in funding, pending due diligence. It wasn't enough to replace everything he'd lost, but it was a start. Proof that maybe he hadn't destroyed everything after all. He went home that evening at a reasonable hour for once, and found Liam and Ava building an elaborate castle out of Legos in the living room. "Daddy, look!" Liam pointed at a crooked tower. "This is the dragon's lair. Ava helped me make it breathe fire. Well, pretend fire. Real fire would be dangerous." "Very dangerous," Ethan agreed, sitting down on the floor beside them. "Can I help?" "You can build the moat," Liam decided, "but you have to make it deep enough that the dragon can't cross it." They spent an hour building. Ethan's moat was structurally unsound and collapsed twice, but Liam thought it was hilarious both times. Ava built a bridge that was actually pretty impressive from an engineering standpoint, and Ethan found himself watching her hands as she snapped the small plastic pieces together with confident precision. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "Sorry." "I didn't say stop." The corner of her mouth twitched. "I said you're staring." Liam was oblivious, narrating an elaborate story about the dragon and a knight and a princess who didn't need rescuing because she had a sword. Ethan listened and built his terrible moat and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Content. That was the word. He felt content. After Liam went to bed, Ethan found himself lingering in the kitchen while Ava cleaned up the Legos. It was becoming a habit, these evening conversations with her. He looked forward to them more than he wanted to admit. "Good day?" she asked. "Better than expected. Got a provisional funding commitment." "That's great." She looked genuinely pleased. "See? Not destroying the company after all." "Jury's still out on that." He grabbed a beer from the fridge, then held up a second one. "Want one?" Ava hesitated, then nodded. Ethan handed it to her, and they stood in the kitchen drinking beer in comfortable silence. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said finally. "Sure. Why did you become a nanny? I mean, you're clearly smart enough to do anything. Why this?" Ava took a long drink before answering. "Flexible hours, cash pay under the table when I needed it. And kids don't judge you for not having a college degree." "That's it?" "That's it." She set her beer down. "Not everyone gets to follow their dreams, Mr. Cole. Some of us just survive and hope that's enough." "Do you have dreams? Things you want that aren't just survival?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Everyone has dreams. The trick is not letting them hurt you when they don't come true." "That's a depressing way to live." "That's a realistic way to live." But her voice was soft, not bitter. "You grow up with money. You think anything is possible. You grow up without it. You learn the difference between possible and probable pretty quick." "What would you do?" Ethan pressed. "If money wasn't an issue, if you could do anything." "I don't play that game." "Why not?" "Because it's pointless." She picked up her beer again, swirled it absently. "Fantasizing about things I can't have doesn't make my life better. It just makes it harder to appreciate what I do have." "Which is?" "A roof over my head, a job that doesn't destroy my body, a kid who makes me laugh every day." She met his eyes. "That's more than a lot of people get." Ethan felt something twist in his chest. You deserve more than that. Everyone deserves more than they get. That's life. It doesn't have to be. For people like you, maybe. Ava's voice was gentle but firm. But for people like me? Yeah, it does. And that's okay. I've made peace with it. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she could have anything she wanted if she just tried. But he was starting to understand that was exactly the kind of privileged thinking Ava had been calling him out on for weeks. His world and her world operated under completely different rules, and pretending otherwise was insulting to everything she'd survived. I'm sorry, he said instead. For what? For not understanding, for thinking I could fix things just by throwing money at them, for being blind to how hard you've had to work for things I took for granted. Ava studied him with those dark, intelligent eyes. You're learning. That's something. Is it enough? I don't know yet. She finished her beer and set the bottle on the counter. But you're trying. That counts for something. After she went to bed, Ethan sat alone in his kitchen and thought about dreams deferred and survival masquerading as life, and a woman who'd taught herself programming from library books because she'd never had the luxury of believing anything was possible. 3 days later, Seattle was hit by the worst storm of the year. Rain hammered against the windows like bullets, and wind howled through the city with enough force to knock out power in half the neighborhoods. Ethan's penthouse lost electricity at 8 p.m., right in the middle of an important video call with the Portland investors. His laptop died mid-sentence. His phone started draining immediately as it searched for a signal, and the entire penthouse was plunged into darkness except for the emergency lighting in the hallways. Great, Ethan muttered, fumbling for his phone's flashlight. He found Liam in his room, huddled under his covers with his stuffed elephant. The kid was terrified of storms. Hey, buddy, you okay? Is the power coming back? Probably not for a while. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. But we're safe. The building's solid. Just a lot of noise. I don't like it. I know. Ethan pulled Liam into a hug. Want to camp out in the living room? We can light some candles, make it an adventure. Liam nodded against his chest, and Ethan carried him out to the living room where Ava was already setting up candles on the coffee table. I raided your emergency supplies, she said without looking up. Hope you don't mind. Not at all. She'd found blankets and pillows, created a sort of nest on the floor in front of the dead fireplace. Liam immediately crawled into it, and Ava settled beside him with a flashlight and a book. Want me to read to you? She asked. Yes, please. Ethan watched them in the candlelight, Ava's calm voice reading some adventure story about pirates while Liam slowly relaxed against her shoulder. The storm raged outside, shaking the windows, but inside this bubble of blankets and candlelight, everything felt safe. His phone buzzed with a text from his lead engineer. Multiple server crashes. Need you now. Then another. This is bad. Really bad. Ethan's stomach dropped. He stepped into the hallway to make a call, but the signal was terrible. Broken sentences, cutting out every few seconds. Complete failure. Can't access. Losing data. I can't hear you, Ethan said. The storm is, need to fix this, or everything. The call dropped completely. Ethan tried calling back 3 times, but it wouldn't connect. He pulled up his laptop, but without power, and with the battery dead, it was useless. He was cut off. His company was in crisis and he was trapped in a dark penthouse with no way to help. The panic hit him like a wave. Everything he'd built, everything he'd fought for, could be collapsing right now and he couldn't do anything about it. The investors would pull out. The board would vote him out. He'd lose it all because he couldn't be there when it mattered most. Ethan sank down against the hallway wall, his breathing shallow and rapid. His hands were shaking. The walls felt too close. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't... Ethan. Ava was kneeling in front of him, her hands on his shoulders, her face close to his. Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. I can't. The company... Breathe first, company second. Her voice was firm but not unkind. In, out, come on. He focused on her face in the dim light, on her steady breathing, and slowly his own breathing matched hers. The panic receded slightly, enough for him to think. My servers are crashing, he managed. My team called, but I can't reach them. I can't fix it. Where's your laptop? Dead. No power. You have a backup battery in your office. I've seen it. She stood up, pulling him with her. Come on. She was right. Ethan had a massive backup battery that he'd bought during a previous outage and never actually used. Ava found it in 60 seconds, plugged in his laptop, and within 3 minutes he was staring at his email. 14 messages from his team, all panicked, all describing the same catastrophic failure across multiple systems. "I need to see the actual systems," Ethan said, "but I can't access them remotely without the VPN configured correctly." Ava was looking over his shoulder at the screen. "Your setup is wrong. The encryption protocol changed last month, but nobody updated the client." "How do you know that?" "I pay attention." She reached past him for the keyboard. "May I?" Ethan slid over, too stressed to question it. Ava's fingers flew across the keys, typing commands he barely followed. Within 2 minutes, she'd reconfigured his VPN and gotten him access to the company servers. "There," she said, "you're in." Ethan pulled up the system logs and felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just a crash, this was a cascading failure across every major system. Data corruption, broken connections, processes terminating randomly. It was chaos. "What caused this?" Ava asked, reading over his shoulder. "I don't know. It doesn't make sense. These systems don't even talk to each other directly. But they all connect to the same database cluster." Ethan pulled up the database logs. Ava was right. Everything routed through the central cluster, and the cluster was showing signs of massive corruption. "This is going to take hours to fix," Ethan said, his voice hollow. "Maybe days. And without power, I can't. The battery will last 6 hours if you're careful." Ava was still studying the logs. "Can I ask you something?" "What?" "Did anything change in the last 48 hours? Any updates? Any new deployments?" Ethan thought back. "We pushed a minor update Tuesday. Just some optimization tweaks." "Show me the deployment logs." He pulled them up. Ava read through them quickly, her expression focused in a way that reminded Ethan of watching her fix his original bug weeks ago. "There," she said, pointing. "That optimization script. It's running a cleanup process every 15 minutes. So it's deleting cache files that your other systems are still using. Every time it cleans up, it breaks active connections. The other systems try to reconnect, but the cleanup script runs again before they can stabilize. It's a loop." Ethan stared at the logs. She was right. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. "How did you see that so fast?" "Because I'm not looking for complicated problems. Sometimes the obvious answer is the right answer." She stood up. "Kill the cleanup script, restart the database cluster, and your system should stabilize. It can't be that simple. Try it." Ethan did, disabled the script, initiated a manual restart of the database cluster, and watched as slowly, painfully, the system started stabilizing. Error rates dropped, connections restored. Data started flowing normally again. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Is it working?" "Yeah, it's working." He looked up at her. "You just saved my company. Again." Ava shrugged. "I just saw a pattern. You would have found it eventually." "No, I wouldn't have. I was panicking. I couldn't think straight." He stood up, and suddenly they were very close in the small office, lit only by candlelight and the laptop screen. "You're incredible. Do you know that?" "I'm observant. There's a difference." "Ava," she stepped back slightly, breaking the moment. "You should call your team. Let them know it's fixed." "Right. Yeah." Ethan grabbed his phone, but the signal was still terrible. He managed to send a text that hopefully got through, but there was no way to know. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the tension from seconds before still hanging in the air. "I should check on Liam," Ava said finally. "Ava, wait." She paused in the doorway. "Thank you. Not just for fixing the problem, but for..." He struggled to find the words. "For being here. For keeping me from completely falling apart." "You're welcome." Her voice was soft. "But Ethan, you need to stop thinking I'm some kind of miracle worker. I'm just a person who pays attention." "You're more than that." "No, I'm not. And you need to stop putting me on a pedestal. It's not fair to either of us." She left before he could respond, and Ethan stood in his dark office thinking about pedestals and panic attacks, and the way his heart had sped up when she'd been close enough to touch. He was in trouble, the kind of trouble that had nothing to do with his company and everything to do with the woman who'd just walked away. Ethan went back to the living room to find Liam asleep in the nest of blankets and Ava sitting by the window watching the storm. The rain had intensified, sheets of water streaming down the glass. "Is everything okay?" she asked without looking at him. "With the company?" "Yeah, thanks to you." "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." He sat down beside her, keeping a careful distance. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Depends on the question. Earlier when you said I was putting you on a pedestal, why did that bother you?" Ava was quiet for a long moment. "Because pedestals are lonely, and because people on pedestals always fall eventually, and then whoever put them there gets disappointed." "I'm not going to be disappointed. You don't know that." She finally looked at him. "You're seeing me through this lens of me being special or different because I can code and solve problems. But that's not who I am. That's just something I can do." "Then who are you?" "I'm tired, Mr. Cole. I'm tired and scared and doing my best to keep my head above water, same as everyone else. I'm not a genius. I'm not going to save your company or change your world. I'm just trying to survive." "You're doing more than surviving." "Am I?" Her laugh was bitter. "I live in a room off someone else's kitchen. I take care of someone else's kid. I fix someone else's problems. That's not a life, that's just existing." "Then change it. Take the job I offered. Build something of your own. With what capital? What connections? What safety net?" She shook her head. "You don't understand what it's like to risk everything when you have nothing. One wrong move and I'm back to cleaning houses or worse. At least this job is stable. You're afraid." "Of course I'm afraid." Her voice rose slightly. Then she glanced at Liam to make sure she hadn't woken him. "I've been afraid my whole life. Afraid of losing the apartment. Afraid of my sister not having enough to eat. Afraid of getting sick because I can't afford a doctor. Fear is what keeps me alive." "It's also what's keeping you trapped." "And what are you trapped by?" She shot back. "Money? Success? The need to prove you're better than your father? We're all trapped by something, Ethan. At least my cage keeps me safe." It was the first time she'd called him by his first name. He noticed it, and from the slight widening of her eyes, so did she. "I should go to bed," she said quickly. "Ava, don't." She stood up. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. I work for you. You're my boss. This—" She gestured between them. "Whatever this is, it can't happen." "What if I don't want to be your boss anymore?" "Then I'd be unemployed, which would solve exactly nothing." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I know how this story goes. Rich guy falls for the help, makes her all kinds of promises, and then reality sets in and she's left with nothing. I won't do that to myself." "I'm not going to hurt you." "You can't promise that. Nobody can." She started toward her room, then paused. "For what it's worth, I wish things were different. I wish I could be the kind of person who takes risks and believes in happy endings. But I'm not, and I can't." She disappeared into her room, and Ethan sat alone by the window watching the storm and wondering when exactly he'd started falling for a woman who was convinced he'd only let her down. The power came back on at 3 a.m., sudden and jarring. Ethan was still on the couch, having given up on sleep. His phone immediately started buzzing with messages from his team, confirming that the systems were stable, that the crisis was over, that everything was functioning normally. But nothing felt normal anymore. Ethan stared at the messages and thought about what Ava had said, about fear and survival and the difference between existing and living, about pedestals and disappointment and all the ways he could hurt her without meaning to. She was right to keep her distance. He was a mess. His life was a mess, and she deserved better than being his emotional rescue plan. But knowing that didn't change how he felt. The storm finally broke as dawn approached, leaving the city washed clean and quiet. Ethan watched the sunrise from his balcony and made a decision. He wouldn't push Ava, wouldn't make her uncomfortable or put her in a position where she felt she had to choose between her job and her principles. But he also wouldn't give up on showing her that she was worth more than surviving, that she deserved more than safety and fear. Even if it took forever. Even if she never believed him. The morning after the storm felt like waking up in a different world. Everything looked sharper, cleaner, like the rain had washed away more than just the dirt. Ethan made breakfast with Liam, careful not to meet Ava's eyes across the kitchen. The silence between them was thick with everything unsaid from the night before. "Can we go to the park today?" Liam asked through a mouthful of pancake. The storm probably made huge puddles, and I want to jump in them. I have meetings all day, buddy. Liam's face fell in that way that made Ethan hate himself. You always have meetings. I know. I'm sorry. I can take him, Ava said quietly. If that's okay. That would be great, thank you. Ethan risked a glance at her, but she was focused on wiping syrup off Liam's face. After they left, the penthouse felt emptier than usual. Ethan went to his office and tried to focus on work, but his mind kept circling back to Ava standing by the window saying she couldn't take risks, couldn't believe in happy endings. The resignation in her voice had gutted him. His phone rang. The Portland investors. Cole, we need to talk about last night. Ethan's stomach dropped. The server issues? We saw the alerts. Looked bad. How bad was it really? He could lie, minimize it, make it sound like no big deal. That's what the old Ethan would have done. But he was trying to be different now. It was catastrophic for about 3 hours, complete system failure, but we identified the root cause and fixed it. 3 hours? The investor's voice was sharp. That kind of downtime could have cost you millions. It could have, but it didn't. Who fixed it? Your head engineer? Ethan hesitated. This was the moment. He could take credit again, protect his image, keep everything simple, or he could tell the truth and deal with whatever came next. My son's nanny fixed it. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm sorry, what? Ava Brooks. She's been teaching herself programming for 3 years. She identified the problem in about 10 minutes and walked me through the fix. More silence. Ethan could practically hear the investor's thoughts churning. You're telling me a nanny with no formal education solved a problem your entire engineering team couldn't handle? That's exactly what I'm telling you. That's either the most impressive thing I've heard all year or a serious indictment of your hiring practices. Probably both, Ethan admitted. The investor laughed. Well, at least you're honest about it. Look, we're still interested, but we need to meet this woman. If she's as good as you say, we want to understand why she's not already on your team. She turned down my job offer. Then make her a better offer. Someone with that kind of raw talent doesn't come along often. Don't let pride or bureaucracy get in the way. After the call ended, Ethan sat staring at his phone. Make her a better offer. Easier said than done when the woman in question had made it clear she didn't trust him, his world, or his motives. But maybe that was the problem. He'd been offering her a job when what she actually needed was something else entirely. He just had to figure out what. 3 days later, Ethan's company held its annual Innovation Summit. It was a big deal. 200 employees, 50 investors, demonstrations of new technology, speeches about the future. Ethan usually dreaded these events, but this year he had a plan. A risky, possibly stupid plan that Ava was going to hate. The summit was held in a downtown hotel ballroom. Ethan gave his opening remarks, talked about the company's growth and vision, the usual CEO platitudes. But halfway through his speech, he went off script. I want to tell you about something that happened a few weeks ago, he said, watching the audience settle into attentive silence. We had a critical bug that threatened a $300 million acquisition. My team of elite engineers, people with degrees from Stanford and M1T, worked on it for weeks. They couldn't solve it. He paused, letting that sink in. Then someone with no formal education, no corporate experience, and no access to our usual resources looked at the problem for about 20 minutes and fixed it. Not just fixed it, made it better. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ethan could see his board members exchanging worried glances. That person is in this room today. Ava Brooks, could you stand up, please? Ethan watched Ava's face go through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, alarm, then pure fury. She was sitting in the back row, having only agreed to come because Liam had begged her to watch his dad give a speech. She stood slowly, her hands clenched at her sides. Ava has been working as my son's nanny for 6 months. In that time, she's also saved my company twice. Not because I asked her to, but because she saw problems that needed solving, and she solved them. She taught herself programming from library books and free online courses because she couldn't afford college. She's smarter than half the people in this room and more innovative than most. The audience was dead silent now. Ethan could see some people looking at Ava with interest, others with skepticism, still others with the kind of calculating assessment that made his skin crawl. I've spent my career believing that success came from the right schools. the right connections, the right pedigree. Ava proved me wrong. Talent doesn't care about your bank account or your zip code. It just is. And we're fools if we keep ignoring it because it doesn't come in the package we expect. He looked directly at Ava. Her face was unreadable. So here's what I'm proposing. Starting next month, my company is launching a new initiative. We're going to partner with public libraries and community centers to offer free coding workshops and mentorship programs. We're going to create scholarships and internships specifically for people without traditional educational backgrounds. And we're going to actively recruit talent from places we've been ignoring. The applause started slowly, then built. People were standing, investors were nodding, but Ethan only cared about one person's reaction, and Ava was already pushing her way toward the exit. He found her in the hotel lobby 20 minutes later, after the speech ended, and he'd escaped the crowd of people wanting to congratulate him or pitch their own ideas. "That was unforgivable," she said before he could speak. "You had no right to put me on display like that." "You're right. I'm sorry." "You're sorry?" Her voice shook. "You just told 200 people my entire life story without asking. You used me as a prop for your corporate redemption arc, and you think sorry covers that?" "No, I don't." Ethan stepped closer. "I screwed up. I should have talked to you first. I should have asked permission. I was so focused on trying to prove a point that I didn't think about how it would make you feel. You never think about how things make me feel." Ava's eyes were bright with angry tears. "You just do whatever seems right to you and expect everyone else to fall in line. That's not partnership, Ethan. That's you playing savior again." "I'm not trying to save you." "Yes, you are. That whole speech was about how you discovered this hidden gem and now you're going to share it with the world. Like I'm some kind of charity case you get to parade around." She swiped at her eyes furiously. "I told you I didn't want to be on a pedestal. I told you I needed to be safe. And you just destroyed any chance I had of staying invisible." The truth of that hit Ethan like a punch. She was right. He'd exposed her, put a spotlight on her, made her vulnerable in ways she'd specifically asked him not to. "I can fix this." "How? By giving another speech? By throwing more money at the problem?" Ava laughed bitterly. "You can't fix this. You can't fix me. And I'm done letting you try." She started to walk away, and Ethan felt panic claw at his chest. "Wait, please." "Why?" "Because I'm in love with you." The words came out before he could stop them. Ava froze mid-step. "What did you say?" "I'm in love with you." Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it. "I know the timing is terrible, and I know I just betrayed your trust, but I'm in love with you, and I need you to know that before you walk away." Ava turned slowly. Her face was pale. "You don't love me. You love the idea of me. The self-taught programmer, the girl who overcame adversity, the inspiration for your new corporate initiative. But that's not love. That's projection. That's not true. Isn't it?" She crossed her arms. "Tell me one thing about me that has nothing to do with how smart I am or how much I've overcome. One thing." Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. His mind raced through everything he knew about her. She fixed his code. She raised her sister. She taught herself programming. You can't, can you?" Ava's voice was soft now, sad. "Because you don't actually know me, Ethan. You know my circumstances. You know my skills. But you don't know what makes me laugh, or what I dream about, or what I'm afraid of besides poverty. Then tell me. Let me know you." "Why?" "So you can add it to your collection of Ava facts? So you can feel better about yourself for seeing past the nanny to the real person?" She shook her head. "I don't want to be your project or your inspiration or your redemption. I just want to be left alone." She walked out of the lobby, and this time Ethan let her go. Because she was right about all of it. He'd been so focused on proving he wasn't like Marcus Chen, wasn't like all the other rich people who ignored talent in poor people, that he'd turned Ava into a symbol rather than seeing her as a person. And now he'd lost her. Ethan went home to an empty penthouse. Liam was at a friend's house for a play date, and Ava had texted that she was taking a personal day. The silence was oppressive. He sat in his office and pulled up the company's Slack channel where people were already buzzing about the speech. Most of the reactions were positive, people excited about the new initiative, proud to work for a company that valued different kinds of talent. But a few messages made him pause. Did you see Cole's face when he was talking about that nanny? Guy's definitely in love with her. Plot twist. Billionaire falls for the help. How original. Anyone else think it's weird he's been letting his nanny fix critical company bugs? Seems like a security risk. Ethan closed the laptop. They were right to be skeptical. The whole thing did look suspicious from the outside. CEO suddenly discovers his nanny is a genius and starts a whole program to help people like her? It read like a publicity stunt, or worse, like he was trying to justify inappropriate feelings for an employee. His phone rang. His mother, which was never good news. "I saw the video of your speech," she said without preamble. "People are talking." "I'm aware." "Are you sleeping with her?" "What? No." "But you want to be." Ethan rubbed his face. "It's complicated." "It's really not. You're a billionaire CEO in love with your son's nanny. That's not complicated. That's a cliché." His mother's voice softened slightly. "I'm not judging, darling. I'm just warning you that other people will. And if this girl is as smart as you say, she knows it too. She quit. Or she's going to quit, I don't know. Because you put her on stage without asking. How did you—" "I know you, Ethan. You get an idea and you run with it without thinking about collateral damage. It's how you built a billion-dollar company, and it's how you destroyed your marriage." She paused. "If you actually care about this woman, you need to stop trying to fix her life and start listening to what she's actually telling you." After his mother hung up, Ethan sat in the silence and tried to remember every conversation he'd had with Ava. Really remember, not just the parts where she'd impressed him or challenged him. She'd told him she liked doing dishes because it kept her hands busy, that she preferred working with kids because they didn't judge her for not having a degree, that she'd made peace with survival even though it meant giving up on dreams. But what were those dreams? What did she actually want, not what he thought she should want? He didn't know, and that was the problem. Over the next few days, Ava maintained professional distance. She came to work, took care of Liam, and left without engaging with Ethan beyond basic necessities. Liam noticed immediately. "Why isn't Ava talking to you?" he asked at breakfast. "We had a disagreement." "About what?" "Grown-up stuff." Liam frowned. "Did you apologize?" "I did." "Did you mean it?" "Yes." "Then why is she still mad?" Out of the mouths of children. Because sometimes sorry isn't enough. Sometimes you hurt someone badly enough that they need space. "That's dumb," Liam declared. "Ava says forgiveness is important." Ava's right, but forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to normal. Sometimes things change. Liam looked worried. "Is Ava going to leave?" Ethan's throat tightened. "I don't know, buddy. I don't want her to leave. She's my favorite person, except for you." "She's my favorite person, too." That evening, after Liam was asleep, Ethan knocked on Ava's door. She opened it, looking exhausted. "Can we talk?" he asked. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please, 5 minutes." She hesitated, then stepped out into the hallway, closing the door behind her. 5 minutes. "You were right, about everything. I used you to make myself feel better, to prove I wasn't like the people I used to associate with. I didn't see you as a person, I saw you as a cause." Ethan took a breath. "But I want to fix that. Not fix you, fix how I see you. If you'll let me." "How?" "By listening. By asking questions instead of making assumptions. By respecting your boundaries even when I don't understand them." He met her eyes. "And by accepting that you might still decide to leave, and that would be your right." Ava studied him for a long moment. "Why does this matter so much to you?" "Because I meant what I said in the hotel lobby. I love you. Not the idea of you, not what you represent, but you. The woman who makes terrible jokes while fixing code, who teaches my son about dinosaurs, who looks at the world like it's constantly disappointing her, but she keeps showing up anyway." He smiled slightly. "I want to know what makes you laugh. I want to know your dreams, even the ones you think are impossible. I want to know you, Ava, the real you." "I like old movies," she said suddenly. "The black and white ones from the 40s. I watch them on my laptop when I can't sleep." Ethan blinked. "Yeah?" "And I make up stories about people I see on the bus, give them whole lives in my head based on what they're wearing or reading." She looked away. "It's stupid." "It's not stupid. I wanted to be a teacher when I was a kid. Elementary school. I thought it would be nice to help kids learn things." Her voice was soft. "But teachers need degrees, and degrees cost money I didn't have. So I taught myself things instead. Programming was just one of them. What else did you teach yourself? How to fix cars, how to cook on $5 a day, how to make my sister's birthday special when we had nothing. She met his eyes. How to be invisible so people like you wouldn't notice people like me. I'm sorry I made you visible against your will. I know you are. She leaned against the wall. But that doesn't change what happened. Every person at that summit now knows my face, my story. Some of them are going to look me up, judge me, make assumptions. I can't be invisible anymore, and that terrifies me. Why? Because invisible people are safe. They can't be used or exploited or disappointed. They just exist. She wrapped her arms around herself. You took that from me. I did, and I can't give it back. Ethan stepped closer. But what if being visible wasn't a bad thing? What if it meant opportunity instead of danger? Opportunity for what? To be your poster child for diversity? To prove that poor people can be smart too if rich people just give them a chance? She shook her head. I don't want to be anyone's inspiration. I just want to live my life. Then live it. On your terms. Ethan pulled an envelope from his pocket. I had my lawyer draw this up. It's a contract for a consulting position with my company. Flexible hours, work from home, double what I'm paying you now. No strings, no expectations beyond doing work you're actually good at. Ava didn't take the envelope. Why? Because you deserve to be paid what you're worth. Because my company needs people who think differently. And because I'm trying to prove that I can separate my feelings from my business decisions. By offering me a job? By offering you a choice. Take it or don't. Stay in Seattle or move somewhere else. Keep working as Liam's nanny or try something new. Whatever you decide, I'll support it. He set the envelope on the hallway table. I just want you to be happy, Ava, even if that happiness doesn't include me. He walked back to his room before she could respond, and spent the night staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd just made things better or worse. The next morning, the envelope was gone. Ava found him in the kitchen making terrible coffee at 6 a.m. I read the contract, she said. And? It's generous. Maybe too generous. You're worth it. You don't know that. You've seen me fix a few bugs and solve a couple problems. That doesn't mean I can handle actual corporate work. Then try it and find out. If it doesn't work, you can go back to being Liam's nanny or find something else entirely. No pressure. Ava poured herself coffee, added an obscene amount of sugar. Can I ask you something? Anything. What do you actually want from me? Not the company stuff, not the consultant position. What do you want? Ethan thought carefully before answering. I want to know you. I want to hear about the old movies you watch and the stories you make up about strangers. I want to understand why you find safety in invisibility and what it would take for you to feel safe being seen. He paused. And yeah, I want a chance for this, he gestured between them, to maybe turn into something, but only if you want that too. I don't know what I want. Ava's voice was small. I've spent so long focused on survival that I don't know how to think about anything else. Then figure it out. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at him over the rim of her coffee cup. You're different than I thought you'd be. Good different or bad different? Complicated different. She set her cup down. I'll take the job. On a trial basis, 3 months. If it works, we'll talk about extending it. If it doesn't, I go back to being just the nanny with no hard feelings. Deal. But we need boundaries. You're technically going to be my boss, which means this. She mimicked his earlier gesture. Can't happen. Not while I'm figuring out if I'm any good at the job. It wasn't what Ethan wanted to hear, but he understood it. Okay. I'm serious, Ethan. No flirting, no romantic gestures, no blurring the lines. Professional only. I can do that. Ava looked skeptical but didn't argue. When do I start? Whenever you want? Tomorrow then. I'll need today to figure out childcare for Liam during my working hours. I can watch him, Ethan said. I've been meaning to cut back on office time anyway. You're going to work from home to watch your son while I work from your home office doing consulting for your company? Ava laughed. That's ridiculous. That's modern parenting. She shook her head, but she was smiling. A real smile, the kind Ethan hadn't seen in days. It made him want to promise her everything, but he'd learned his lesson about making promises he might not be able to keep. So instead he just smiled back and hoped it was enough. Ava started the next day. Ethan set her up in his home office with a new laptop and access to the company systems. Her first assignment was reviewing the code base for inefficiencies and security vulnerabilities. Within 3 hours, she'd found 17 issues ranging from minor to critical. "Your authentication system is a disaster," she told Ethan over lunch. Liam was at school, and they'd fallen into an easy pattern of eating together while discussing work. "Half your endpoints aren't even validating tokens properly." "Can you fix it?" "I can, but it's going to take a complete overhaul. We're talking weeks of work." "Do it." Ethan paused. "If you want to, I mean. It's your call." Ava gave him a look. "You're being very careful with your words." "I'm trying to respect boundaries." "It's weird. Stop it." "You told me to be professional." "Professional doesn't mean treating me like I'm made of glass." She took a bite of her sandwich. "Just talk to me like a normal person who happens to be doing work for you." "Okay. In that case, your analysis is brilliant and slightly terrifying. How did you find all this so fast?" "I think like someone trying to break in. Most programmers think like someone building a wall. Different perspective." They worked together for the rest of the day, falling into an easy rhythm. Ava would identify problems, Ethan would provide context about why things were built that way, and together they'd figure out solutions. It felt natural in a way that surprised both of them. That evening, while Ethan helped Liam with homework, he could hear Ava on a call with one of the senior engineers. She was walking him through a fix, patient but firm, and the engineer was actually listening, respecting her expertise. Ethan felt a surge of pride that he immediately recognized as potentially problematic. This wasn't about him being proud of her like she was his protege. This was about recognizing that Ava was thriving in an environment that valued her skills. Later, after Liam was in bed, Ava found Ethan on the balcony. "Can I join you?" "Of course." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights. "I had fun today," Ava said finally. "The work was challenging and interesting, and I felt like people actually listened to me." "They should. You know what you're talking about." "It's different, though. When you're the nanny, people tune you out. When you're the consultant, they take notes." She laughed softly. "Same person, different title." "People are idiots." "People are people. They make assumptions based on context." She turned to look at him. "I made assumptions about you, too. Thought you were just another rich guy who didn't care about anything except money." "I kind of was that guy." "Yeah, but you're trying not to be. That counts for something." She hesitated. "I'm sorry for what I said at the hotel. About you not knowing me. That wasn't fair. It was accurate." "Maybe. But you're trying to fix that, and I appreciate it even if I'm not making it easy." "You don't have to make it easy. You just have to be honest." They stood there for a while longer, close but not touching, and Ethan thought about how much had changed in just a few months. How this woman had crashed into his carefully controlled life and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. "I should tell you something," Ava said quietly. "Okay? I'm scared. Of this job, of people's expectations, of the possibility that I might actually be good at this, and then have to figure out what that means for my life." She looked at him. "And I'm scared of you." "Of me?" "Of how you make me feel, like maybe things don't have to be about survival. Like maybe I could want more and it wouldn't destroy me." She wrapped her arms around herself. "That's terrifying." Ethan wanted to pull her close, promise her everything would be okay, but he stayed where he was. "What do you want to do about it?" "I don't know yet. Keep going, I guess. Keep trying. See what happens." "I can work with that." "Can you? Because I'm going to be difficult and defensive and probably push you away when things get too real. Looking forward to it." She laughed, the sound surprised out of her. "You're ridiculous." "I've been told." They went inside together and Ethan felt something settle in his chest. They weren't okay yet. There was still too much hurt and uncertainty between them. But they were trying, both of them, and that was more than he'd hoped for. 3 months passed in a blur of code reviews, family dinners, and careful navigation of the space between professional and personal. Ava proved herself invaluable to the company, not just fixing problems, but preventing them. She thought about systems differently than anyone Ethan had ever worked with, seeing connections and vulnerabilities that others missed. But the success came with complications nobody had anticipated. We need to talk about the San Francisco conference, Ethan's new CFO said during a Monday morning call. The tech summit. They want you to present the new security framework. Have Ava present it. She built most of it. That's the thing. They want both of you. The media is calling you the unlikely partnership that's revolutionizing tech culture. Apparently your story is inspiring. Ethan glanced across the kitchen where Ava was helping Liam with his math homework. She'd heard the whole conversation based on the way her shoulders had tensed. I'll talk to her about it. After the call ended, Ava didn't look up from Liam's worksheet. I'm not going to San Francisco. You don't have to. But you want me to. I want you to do what makes you comfortable. What makes me comfortable is not being paraded around as your diversity mascot. She finally looked at him. Every article about the company mentions me now. The poor girl who made good. The self-taught programmer who saved the billionaire's company. I'm a story to them, not a person. I know. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing and fix it. How? Ava stood up, checked that Liam was distracted with his tablet, then pulled Ethan into the hallway. Tell them I'm just an employee, a good one, but not special, not some inspirational fairy tale. But you are special. See, that's the problem. Her voice was tight with frustration. You keep saying things like that and wondering why I can't just accept the attention. But you don't get it. When you're special, people expect things. They watch you, waiting for you to fail so they can feel better about themselves. And when you do fail, because everyone fails eventually, it's so much worse than if you just stayed invisible. You're not going to fail. You don't know that. Nobody knows that. She rubbed her face. I fixed some bugs and overhauled your security. That doesn't make me a genius or a revolutionary or whatever they're calling me this week. It makes me someone who's good at pattern recognition and has fresh eyes on old problems. Ethan wanted to argue, to tell her she was selling herself short, but he was learning to listen instead of pushing. What do you want to do? He asked. I want to be normal. I want to do my job and go home and not have strangers writing articles about my childhood. She looked away. But I know that's not possible anymore. You made sure of that with your speech. The accusation still stung even months later. I know. So I'll go to San Francisco. I'll smile and present the framework and answer questions about being self-taught. I'll play the part you wrote for me. Her eyes met his. But I'm going to hate every second of it, and I need you to be okay with that. I'm not okay with you being miserable. Then you shouldn't have put me on that stage. She walked back to the kitchen, leaving Ethan in the hallway, feeling like he'd failed a test he kept taking over and over. The week before the conference, Ava worked herself to exhaustion. She stayed up late refining the presentation, practicing answers to potential questions, trying to anticipate every way the event could go wrong. Ethan found her at 2 a.m. on the balcony, laptop open, eyes red from staring at the screen. You need to sleep. I need to not humiliate myself in front of 1,000 people. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. Ava closed her laptop. You've been doing public speaking your whole life. You went to schools that taught you how to present, how to command a room, how to sound confident even when you're full of it. I learned how to code in public libraries between shifts cleaning toilets. It's different. Ethan sat down beside her. You're right. It is different, but that doesn't mean you're going to fail. It doesn't mean I'm going to succeed either. They sat in silence for a while. The city was quiet at this hour, just the occasional car passing below. Can I tell you something? Ethan asked. Sure. I'm terrified too. Ava looked at him skeptically. Of what? Of screwing this up, of saying the wrong thing and making everything worse, of losing you because I keep trying to help in ways that hurt instead. He turned to face her. I'm terrified that you're right, that I turned you into a symbol without meaning to, and now I can't figure out how to turn you back into just a person I care about. You can't turn me back. What's done is done. I know, but I can try to make it better going forward, starting with this conference. He pulled out his phone. I'm going to tell them you're not presenting, that I'll do it solo and give you credit for the work, but you don't have to be on stage. They won't accept that. They want the story. Then they don't get me either. Let them find another keynote speaker. Ava stared at him. You'd really walk away from this? It's huge for the company. The company will survive one missed conference. I'm not sure we will if I keep forcing you into situations that make you feel used. Something shifted in Ava's expression. The wall she'd been maintaining cracked slightly. I don't feel used exactly. I feel exposed, like everyone can see all the parts of me I worked so hard to hide. What parts? The scared parts. The parts that still feel like that 19-year-old kid trying to keep the lights on with 2 jobs and a sister to feed. The parts that think this is all temporary, and someday I'm going to wake up back in that studio apartment wondering what the hell I was thinking. She pulled her knees to her chest. Success is harder than failure in some ways. At least with failure, you know where you stand. You think you're going to fail? I think I'm going to disappoint someone eventually. You, the company, the people who read those articles and think I'm some kind of inspiration. And when that happens, the fall is going to hurt. Ethan wanted to promise her it wouldn't happen, that she was too talented to fail, but he was learning that promises didn't help. What if we went to San Francisco together, but I did all the presenting and you just sat in the audience? You'd still be there, still part of the event, but not on display. They'd ask why. Let them ask. I'll tell them the truth, that you prefer to work behind the scenes, and I respect that. Ava considered this. You'd really do that? After you spent all this time building up the narrative about hidden talent and diverse perspectives? The narrative was never supposed to be about you specifically. It was supposed to be about changing how we find and value talent. You can be part of that without being the poster child. I'll think about it, Ava said finally. They sat on the balcony until the sky started to lighten, talking about everything and nothing. Ethan learned that Ava hated mushrooms but pretended to like them because Liam did, that she'd wanted to learn piano as a kid but could never afford lessons, that her favorite old movie was The Philadelphia Story because Katharine Hepburn reminded her of her mom. She was fierce, Ava said softly. Even when she was dying, even when the medical bills were crushing us, she stayed fierce, told me I could be anything I wanted if I was willing to work for it. Sounds like you took after her. I tried to, but sometimes I wonder if she'd be disappointed that I played it so safe, that I chose survival over dreams. You're here, aren't you? Working in tech, solving problems, raising your sister successfully? That sounds like dreams to me. Small dreams, maybe. Ava smiled slightly. But I guess small dreams count too. When they finally went inside as the sun came up, something had shifted between them again. Not fixed exactly, but softer, more honest. 2 days before the conference, Ava made a decision. I'll present, she told Ethan over breakfast. Liam was at school, and they'd fallen into the habit of using those quiet mornings to talk about work and life in equal measure. You sure? No, but I'm going to do it anyway. She took a sip of coffee. You were right about exposure being different than being used. I felt used when you didn't ask permission, when you made choices for me. But this time you're giving me the choice, and that changes things. What changed your mind? My sister called last night. She's at community college now, studying engineering. She told me she showed her professors those articles about me, and they helped her get a scholarship. Ava's voice was thick with emotion. She said if I could teach myself programming while working 2 jobs, she could handle college with just 1 job and financial aid. She called me her hero. Ethan felt his chest tighten. That's amazing. It is. And it's terrifying. Because what if I screw up? What if I'm not actually that good and everyone figures it out and then my sister's hero is just a fraud? You're not a fraud. But what if I am? What if I just got lucky a few times? Luck doesn't overhaul an entire security framework. Luck doesn't identify vulnerabilities that professional security firms missed. Luck doesn't train 3 junior developers so well that they're now outperforming people with twice their experience. Ethan leaned forward. You're scared. That's normal. But don't confuse fear with incompetence. When did you get so wise? I have a very smart consultant who keeps calling me out on my nonsense. Some of it sinks in. Ava laughed, and the sound filled the kitchen with warmth. Okay, I'll do it, but you have to promise me something. Anything. If I bomb, if I freeze on stage or say something stupid or humiliate myself, you have to promise not to try to fix it. Let me fall on my own and get back up on my own. That's a terrible promise to ask for. I know, but I need it. I need to know that you trust me to handle my own failures. Ethan wanted to argue, but he understood what she was really asking. She needed to know she was more than a project to him, more than someone he felt responsible for. She needed autonomy, even in failure. Okay, I promise. They flew to San Francisco 2 days later. Liam came too, because he'd never been on a plane and was vibrating with excitement about it. Ethan had booked 3 seats, him, Ava, and Liam between them. "This is amazing!" Liam pressed his face to the window as they took off. "Look how small everything is. Are we going to touch the clouds?" "Probably fly through some," Ava said, smiling at his wonder. "Cool. Do you think clouds taste like cotton candy?" "Probably more like wet air." "That's disappointing." Ethan watched them together and felt something settle in his chest. This makeshift family they'd built, messy and complicated and held together by more than just employment, felt right in a way nothing had in years. The conference was massive. 2,000 attendees, dozens of speakers, exhibitors everywhere. Ethan and Ava were scheduled for the final keynote of day 2, prime real estate that made Ava increasingly nervous as the day approached. "What if they hate it?" she asked the night before, pacing their hotel suite while Liam slept in the adjoining room. "They won't." "What if I forget everything?" "You won't." "What if someone asks a question I can't answer?" "Then you say, 'I don't know, but I'll find out.' Nobody expects you to know everything." Ava stopped pacing and looked at him. "How are you so calm?" "I'm not. I'm terrified. But I'm terrified of different things." "Like what?" "Like you getting up there and being brilliant and realizing you don't need me anymore. That you can have this whole career in life without the guy who exploited you for a corporate diversity speech." He tried to smile, but it came out wrong. "That the only reason you're still here is because it's easier than starting over somewhere else." Ava crossed the room and sat beside him on the couch. "Is that what you really think?" "Sometimes." "You're an idiot." "I've been told." "I'm still here because I want to be here. Because somehow you went from being my boss, who I tolerated, to being someone I actually like spending time with." She bumped his shoulder with hers. "Even when you're being ridiculous." "Just like? Not any stronger feeling?" "Don't push it." But she was smiling, and when Ethan reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, both thinking about tomorrow, and everything that could go right or wrong. "Can I tell you something?" Ava asked quietly. "Always." "I'm glad you didn't let me stay invisible, even though it's been scary and uncomfortable, and I've hated you for it sometimes." She squeezed his hand. "My sister has a scholarship. I have a job I actually enjoy. And I have whatever this is with you that I'm too scared to define but don't want to lose. None of that would have happened if I'd stayed invisible. So you forgive me for the speech? I'm working on it. Ask me again in a few months." "I can do that." The next day arrived faster than either of them wanted. Ethan went over the presentation one final time while Ava paced and Liam played games on his tablet, oblivious to the tension. "You ready?" Ethan asked when it was almost time. "Absolutely not." "Perfect. Let's go." The ballroom was packed. Ethan walked on stage first, did the introduction, set up the context. Then he called Ava up, and the applause was thunderous. She froze for a second at the edge of the stage, and Ethan saw the panic in her eyes. But then she squared her shoulders and walked out, and by the time she reached the podium, her face was calm. "Hi," she said into the microphone. "I'm Ava Brooks, and I taught myself to code from library books because I couldn't afford anything else." The room went silent. "I'm not going to stand up here and tell you some inspirational story about overcoming adversity through sheer determination. That's not how it worked. I got lucky. I got a job working for someone who happened to leave his laptop open at the right time. I got lucky that he listened instead of firing me, and I got lucky that I'm good at recognizing patterns in code." She clicked to the first slide. "But here's what I want to talk about instead. I want to talk about all the people who didn't get lucky. All the brilliant minds solving problems in their communities who never get discovered because nobody's looking in the right places. I want to talk about how we've built systems that exclude people based on credentials instead of capability, and how much talent we're wasting because we're too lazy to look beyond traditional pipelines." Ethan watched from the side of the stage as Ava transformed. The nervousness fell away, and what emerged was someone fierce and focused, speaking with authority about things she'd lived. She walked through the security framework technically, showing how her different perspective had identified vulnerabilities others missed. But she kept coming back to the bigger point, that diversity of thought came from diversity of experience. And diversity of experience came from actually recruiting from different places. The question isn't whether there are talented people without degrees, she said near the end. The question is whether you're brave enough to bet on them when you find them. Whether you're willing to invest in someone who learned on their own instead of someone with an Ivy League pedigree. Whether you can look past the resume to see the person. She paused, looking out at the audience. I'm standing here because one person was willing to take that chance. But I shouldn't be an anomaly. I should be normal. And the only way to make that happen is if people like you, she gestured at the crowd, start actively seeking out talent in places you've been ignoring. The applause started before she finished her closing remarks. People stood. Ethan saw tech CEOs and venture capitalists and industry leaders on their feet, clapping for a woman who 6 months ago was unknown and invisible. Ava walked off stage and straight into Ethan's arms. She was shaking. I did it, she whispered. You crushed it. I didn't fall apart. You were incredible. She pulled back to look at him. I think I just signed myself up for 1 million interviews and follow-up requests. Probably. I might regret this tomorrow. Also probably. But right now I feel like I could do anything. You can, Ethan said. That's what I've been trying to tell you. They were mobbed the second they left the stage area. Journalists, other presenters, attendees wanting to meet Ava. She handled it better than Ethan expected, deflecting the inspirational framing while staying professional and friendly. An older woman from a major tech company pushed through the crowd. Ms. Brooks? I'm Sarah Chen, head of engineering at DataCore. I'd love to talk to you about a position. We need someone with your perspective. Thank you, but I'm happy where I am. We could double whatever you're making. Ava glanced at Ethan, then back at Sarah. It's not about the money. It's about working somewhere I actually want to be. 3 more offers came in that evening, then 5 more the next day. By the time they flew back to Seattle, Ava had 12 standing job offers from major companies, 2 speaking invitations, and a book deal request. This is insane, she said on the plane while Liam slept against her shoulder. 6 months ago, I was cleaning houses. Now publishers want my life story. What are you going to do? Turn them all down. She said it without hesitation. Why? Because I don't want to be a professional inspiration. I want to write code and solve problems and live my life. She looked at him. Is that okay? Are you going to be disappointed? Never. Whatever you decide is okay. Even if I decide to go back to just being Liam's nanny? Even then. Though you might be overqualified at this point. Ava laughed. Definitely overqualified. When they got back to the penthouse, Liam ran straight to his room to play with the toys they'd bought him in San Francisco. Ava and Ethan stood in the kitchen, the space that had become the center of their strange little family. I need to tell you something, Ava said. Ethan's heart sank. Here it comes. The part where she realized she could do better, go somewhere else, be someone else's inspiration instead of his. I'm in love with you. Ethan's brain stopped working. What? I'm in love with you? I have been for a while. Maybe since the night you fired Marcus Chen. Definitely since you let me fall apart on the balcony without trying to fix me. She was talking fast, like she needed to get it all out before she lost courage. I know the timing is terrible and the power dynamic is weird, and I'm probably making a huge mistake telling you this. But I just spent 2 days watching other people try to recruit me, and all I could think was that I didn't want to work for anyone else. I wanted to work with you, live with you. Whatever this thing we've built is, I want to keep building it. Ethan crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and kissed her. It wasn't smooth. Their noses bumped and Ava made a surprised noise, and he had to adjust the angle twice. But it was perfect anyway, because it was real and messy and exactly what both of them needed. I love you too, he said when they finally broke apart. In case that wasn't clear. It was reasonably clear. Just reasonably? You could try again to make sure. So he did. Liam found them 20 minutes later, still in the kitchen, talking quietly with their foreheads pressed together. Are you guys dating now? He asked with the bluntness of a 6-year-old. Maybe, Ethan said. How would you feel about that? Liam considered this seriously. Does it mean Ava stays forever? If she wants to. Then I think it's a good idea. He paused. Can we have pizza for dinner to celebrate? We just had pizza yesterday. But this is a special occasion. They ordered pizza, ate it on the floor of the living room like they had during the storm. Liam talked endlessly about the plane and San Francisco and how his dad and Ava were being gross, but in a good way. After Liam went to bed, Ethan and Ava ended up back on the balcony. Their spot. "So what now?" Ava asked. "Now we figure it out as we go." "That's not much of a plan." "It's the only plan I've got." Ethan pulled her closer. "We take it slow. We keep working together because we're good at that. We see where this goes without putting pressure on it to be anything specific. And if it doesn't work out, then we deal with it like adults. But I don't think that's going to happen." "Why not?" "Because we've been through too much to give up easy. Because we're both too stubborn to quit when things get hard. And because I'm pretty sure I'm going to love you until it's embarrassing. It's already embarrassing. Then we're right on track." 6 months later, Ethan stood in the same ballroom where Ava had given her speech and looked out at a very different crowd. The Innovation Summit had become his company's diversity and inclusion conference, attended by library workers and community college professors and people who taught themselves skills because traditional education wasn't accessible. Ava stood beside him, not as his employee or his consultant, but as his co-founder. They'd restructured the company to reflect their partnership, much to the board's initial horror and eventual acceptance. "You ready?" she asked. "Are you?" Getting there. They'd invited 50 students from underserved communities to attend the conference, all expenses paid. Kids who taught themselves to code or design or engineer solutions to problems in their neighborhoods. Kids who reminded Ethan of Ava at 19, brilliant and scared and convinced their circumstances would always define them. The goal wasn't to recruit them, though some would probably end up working for the company eventually. The goal was to show them what was possible, to prove that talent mattered more than pedigree, and to create a network of support that didn't exist before. "Thank you all for being here," Ethan said into the microphone. 6 months ago, my co-founder Ava Brooks stood on a stage and challenged the tech industry to look beyond traditional talent pipelines. Today, we're putting our money where our mouth is. Ava took over, introducing the scholarship program they'd created, the mentorship network, the partnerships with libraries and community centers. The audience listened with the kind of attention that came from seeing themselves reflected in the speakers. Afterward, a young woman approached them, maybe 19, dressed in clothes that had clearly been chosen carefully from limited options. "Ms. Brooks? I just wanted to say thank you. I've been teaching myself Python for 2 years, but everyone keeps telling me I need a degree to get a real job. Your story made me think maybe they're wrong." Ava smiled. "They are wrong, but it's still hard. Don't let anyone tell you it's not." "Will it be worth it?" "I don't know. That depends on what you want worth to mean." Ava glanced at Ethan. "But I can tell you that taking the risk is better than always wondering what if." The young woman left looking more hopeful, and Ethan squeezed Ava's hand. "That was good," he said. "She reminds me of me. Scared, but trying anyway." "You're still scared." "Every day. But I'm learning to be scared and do things anyway." That evening, back at the penthouse, they found Liam building another elaborate castle with the engineering set Ava had bought him. He was humming while he worked, completely absorbed. "He's got your focus," Ethan said, "and your stubbornness." Ava sat down beside Liam. "What are you building, buddy?" "A house for our family. See, this is my room, and this is your room with Dad, and this is the kitchen where we have breakfast." He pointed to different sections. "And this is the balcony where you guys go to talk when you think I'm asleep." Ethan and Ava exchanged glances. "We didn't think you noticed that," Ava said. "I notice everything. You taught me that." Liam snapped another piece into place. "Are you going to marry my dad?" "Someday, maybe. If he asks." "I'm asking," Ethan said. Both Ava and Liam looked at him in surprise. "What?" Ava's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm asking, right now." Ethan got down on the floor beside them, among the building blocks and toy figures. It wasn't romantic or planned, but it was real. "Ava Brooks, will you marry me?" "You don't have a ring," Liam pointed out. "I can get a ring." "You should get a ring first. That's how it works in movies." "Liam's right," Ava said, but she was smiling with tears in her eyes. "You should probably have a ring, and maybe plan this better. And, is that a yes? It's a, ask me again when you've thought this through." "I have thought it through. I've been thinking about it for months. I love you. Liam loves you. We want you to stay forever, not as the nanny or the consultant, but as family, real family." That's not how proposals work, Liam stage whispered. How do they work then? You're supposed to do it somewhere fancy, and there should be candles, and you're supposed to say nice things about her. What do you think I'm doing? You're sitting on the floor in your socks talking about family. That's not fancy. Ava was laughing now, tears streaming down her face. Listen to your son. He knows what's up. Fine. I'll do it properly. Ethan stood up. But my answer doesn't change. I want to marry you. Whenever you're ready. However you want. Ask me in a month, Ava said. With a ring? Somewhere that's not the living room floor. Deal. He asked her 4 weeks later on the balcony where they'd had so many important conversations. The ring was simple. She'd said she didn't want anything flashy. And his speech was probably too long and definitely too emotional. But she said yes anyway. And Liam cheered from where he was definitely not supposed to be spying through the glass door. They got married 6 months after that in a small ceremony at the penthouse. Just family and a few close friends. Ava's sister was her maid of honor. Liam was the ring bearer and took his job very seriously. Do you take this woman, the officiant said, to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Ava looked at Ethan, at Liam standing beside them, at the small group of people who'd become their chosen family. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was seen, known, loved. I do, she said. The kiss was better this time. They'd had practice. The applause was loud despite the small crowd. And when they turned to face their guests as husband and wife, Ava felt something she'd never expected to feel, safe. Not because she was hidden, but because she was known and accepted anyway. Later, at the small reception, Ava's sister pulled her aside. I'm proud of you, she said. Mom would be too. You think so? I know so. You took a chance. You let yourself be seen. That took more courage than anything else you've done. Ava watched Ethan across the room, dancing with Liam balanced on his feet. I almost didn't. I was so scared of being disappointed. But you weren't. Not yet. Ask me in 20 years. I will. The party wound down around midnight. Guests left, Liam fell asleep on the couch, and Ethan and Ava ended up on their balcony one more time. So, Ethan said, we did it. We did. Any regrets? Ask me tomorrow. Tonight I'm too happy to think clearly. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. Somewhere out there, Ava thought, were other invisible people. Other brilliant minds teaching themselves skills in public libraries, solving problems nobody knew existed, convinced their circumstances would always define them. She couldn't save them all. She couldn't even save most of them. But she could keep showing up, keep telling her story honestly, keep proving that talent existed everywhere if people bothered to look. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magical transformation, no perfect ending where all problems disappeared. Ava still worried about money, even though she had plenty now. She still felt like an imposter sometimes, still wondered when everyone would realize she'd just gotten lucky. But she'd learned something important over the past year. You didn't have to stop being scared to move forward. You didn't have to have all the answers to take the next step. You just had to be willing to try, to fail, to get back up and try again. And maybe that was the real lesson. Not that hard work guaranteed success, or that talent always got recognized, or that love conquered all, but that being willing to be seen with all your flaws and fears and uncertainties was worth the risk. Because invisible people were safe, yes, but they were also alone. And Ava had learned that being known, truly known by even a few people, was worth more than all the safety in the world. What are you thinking about? Ethan asked. Everything, nothing. How different my life is from what I expected. She leaned against him. How grateful I am that you left your laptop open that night. Best mistake I ever made. It wasn't a mistake. You were careless. Okay, best careless moment I ever had. Better. They went inside together, checked on Liam, who was still sleeping on the couch, and headed to bed. Their bed. In their home. The family they'd built from broken pieces and second chances and the courage to try again. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was real. And messy. And theirs. And that was more than enough.